Across town, the atmosphere in the hospital boardroom turned suffocating as Ted entered with a thick folder in hand, his face icy as he stared directly at Doug, who kept his head low but couldn't hide the tension etched into his expression. The mistake Ted was referring to wasn't a simple clerical error or a miswritten medical order. It was a string of illegal interventions in the hospital's internal operations, unauthorized fund withdrawals, forged payment procedures using authentic stamps, and records signed by Doug himself. It didn't take a genius to realize the common denominator. Doug had used the hospital's name to borrow dirty money from Joey, a shadowy figure manipulating the underground financial system in Fairmont Crest. Joey didn't just lend the money. He turned Doug into a pawn, a laundered front disguised in white lab coats and high-end operating rooms. Ted understood that if Doug went down, the hospital's reputation would crumble, and worse, he himself could be dragged into legal ruin unless he severed that rotten connection immediately. But Doug wasn't stupid. He had long known Joey had deceived him from the start, luring him in with what sounded like financial lifelines that turned out to be nooses. While Ted was busy putting out fires to preserve the hospital's image, Vanessa was stoking the blaze. At a casual wine gathering in the south end of town, she casually mentioned a bonus payout to a few friends, unaware that her offhand remark had drawn the attention of people she never should have crossed paths with. A member of the medical board overheard. A former employee of Joey nodded suspiciously, and the joint medical investment contract she signed with Joey, a shell fund linked to a fake charity, had been flagged by the government. By the weekend, Doug had left the city in a battered silver car, headed not for the hospital nor his home. Instead, he drove toward the outskirts, to a rundown wooden house where Randy once lived with his grandmother. Randy, Doug's childhood friend, once partners in petty theft and cookie heists, was now his only lifeline. But this wasn't a reunion for nostalgia. It was a planning session to fight back against a man they had both once served, trusted, and risked everything to survive, Joey. When Randy had fled a hit job to kill Kenny, he took with him $10,000 and an audio recording that could obliterate Joey's career if released. In exchange, Randy had become a hunted ghost. His name was scrubbed from public systems, and his friends and family received anonymous threats. He lived in the shadows, and now Doug was the only person he trusted, or pretended to trust. Doug couldn't be sure whether Randy genuinely wanted to work together or was setting a trap to redeem himself to Joey. But one thing was clear. Both men were desperate, and when desperation forges alliances, it often ends in blood or a body. In an abandoned warehouse, Randy unrolled a map of Fairmont Crest, marking the casino, the hospital, and Joey's law office. He claimed Joey wasn't just laundering money through the hospital. He was coercing medical staff to leak patient information to sell to black market insurance rings. Randy also revealed that Vanessa had secretly met Joey in a luxury apartment on the east side of town, a place with no cameras and no witnesses to account for her 3-hour stay. Doug began to spiral, unsure if Vanessa was truly a victim or had long been part of the criminal machinery. If she had betrayed him, helped Joey kill Kenny, then their plan for revenge would have no limits. Randy handed Doug a pistol, one he claimed Joey had once used to threaten him. Randy didn't just want Joey exposed, he wanted everything out in the open. The audio, the images, and the full list of names linked to the money web. But he knew if he acted alone, he'd be dead before he could speak. Meanwhile, Vanessa grew anxious as Doug disappeared without a word, and Randy, whom she thought dead or vanished, was spotted near the northern woods, close to an old cabin Joey once used to imprison debtors. Joey began to lose control. He summoned Vanessa and demanded she report Doug's movements while dispatching 2 armed men to monitor the hospital. On a rainy night, Randy's car was rammed from behind as he left the old warehouse, now turned into a chamber of ultimatums. Surrender Randy and all the evidence, or Vanessa would disappear like Kenny. But Doug hadn't come unprepared. Before being taken, Randy fled to an old acquaintance's house, where he unexpectedly ran into Leslie, Ted's daughter, who had secretly been investigating Kenny's disappearance for months and had uncovered that her own mother, Vanessa, Randy agreed, not out of righteousness, but because he had nowhere else to run. When Vanessa was summoned to the police station on suspicion of money laundering, she realized the tides were turning. Doug was found alive, bleeding heavily but surviving, and the recording began circulating in the media. Joey vanished overnight. His office was raided, and all that remained was a charred cell phone in a fireplace. Doug, Randy, Vanessa, and even Ted now stood as potential witnesses in a looming federal case. But one false testimony, one missing piece of evidence, and any of them could be silenced next. And in the shadows of Fairmont Crest, an unfamiliar voice spoke through an anonymous call to Leslie's phone. Kenny isn't dead. But if you keep going, your father will be next. The story isn't over. It's only just begun. Vanessa was entering a stage where every step she took could mark the beginning of an irreversible disaster. She was gradually being pulled into an underground network that had long slipped beyond her control. The extra funds she had carelessly mentioned during a cocktail party in Fairmont Crest could no longer be dismissed with excuses like consulting fees or investment returns. The numbers didn't match. The transactions originated from foreign accounts with strange identifiers, and most alarmingly, the transfer of shares from a public health fund into the hands of a shady entity. All of it had come under the scrutiny of people Vanessa never imagined she would one day face. Her bank account, once a model case for institutional investors, was now being examined down to the last cent by a special FBI unit that tracked interstate money laundering operations. They had uncovered a convoluted trail of transfers starting from a real estate company nominally run by Joey, funneled through 3 nonprofit health organizations. The data showed that all these transactions occurred shortly after Vanessa signed an internal hospital document, one that approved the transfer of financial oversight to a temporary committee, which in reality was a front group controlled by Joey from behind the scenes. The unwanted attention began with a cryptic phone call at midnight. A woman's voice asked if she knew what Jericho 41 meant, then hung up before Vanessa could respond. She checked her message history and realized she had received multiple invitations from an organization called Horizon Trust, which, according to an FBI report, was part of the financial shell structure used for laundering money along the East Coast. A bank employee sent an email alerting her that a record retrieval request had been initiated by the Financial Crime Prevention Unit under the Department of the Treasury. This was no prank. Vanessa understood that the money she had received wasn't a reward for success. It was a chain binding her to a network in which she was merely a disposable link. He had monitored her phone, captured deleted transaction messages, and forwarded them to an old friend in the police department. Whether out of protection or control, Doug spiraled when he realized Vanessa wasn't just being manipulated by Joey. She may have sunk so deep she couldn't escape anymore. What he didn't anticipate, however, was that this act would make Vanessa a target from both sides. Joey, who would erase any trace of his dealings if needed, and federal investigators, who considered any false cooperation an act of criminal complicity. The question now was no longer whether Vanessa was guilty, but whether she could escape this vortex with her life and freedom intact. The numbers on her bank statements didn't lie, and they were telling a story far different from what she had always told herself. And when her name appeared in a leaked internal FBI memo bearing the note, priority level, and did she have the courage to abandon everything she once believed was success to preserve the one thing that now mattered most? Freedom. Or perhaps it was already too late. Vanessa once believed that her intelligence and negotiation skills were enough to manage any relationship. Whether with Joey, a powerful figure in the criminal underworld, or with Doug, the extra money she received, once considered a generous reward for smooth cooperation with Joey, had become the flame that ignited and destroyed every protective layer she had built around herself. At first, it was just a few $100,000 funneled through intermediaries in real estate contracts. But then the amounts grew, disguised as charitable donations, honorary consulting fees, and expanded healthcare benefits. She knew it wasn't legal, but she also knew that saying no to Joey had never been an option. The problem wasn't just the money. That trail was leading her into the crosshairs of an investigation far greater than she had ever imagined. It started with a strange call at 3 a.m. from a man with a flat tone, who left only one sentence: Jericho 41 has been activated. Jericho 41 has been activated. She didn't understand, but Doug did. Doug had once worked with someone in the financial crimes unit, who had told him that Jericho 41 was an internal code used to designate individuals under cross-border money laundering surveillance. The next morning, Vanessa noticed two unfamiliar men in business attire standing across from the hospital, phones in hand but eyes locked on the entrance. One of them stared at her as she got into her car. At the same time, a bank notification appeared on her phone. Your account has been frozen pending investigation under the 1986 Banking Act. She froze. That account held all the extra funds, and now it was inaccessible. Meanwhile, Doug had grown eerily quiet. He no longer questioned her about Joey, nor mentioned the changes in their marriage. He remained silent, but his eyes revealed the truth. He knew. Doug had backed up all data from her computer, emails, contracts, and call logs. What Vanessa didn't know was that Randy, the man who once betrayed Joey and whose life she and Doug had gambled in the casino, was still alive and closer than she thought. Randy had a copy of an audio recording in which Vanessa admitted that the charitable foundation she managed was just a front. In the recording, she said, "Joey needed a place to wash. I just opened the door. I didn't turn on the tap." That sentence alone could turn her from witness to accomplice. Randy wasn't afraid to use that tape to negotiate with the FBI. An email from his assistant arrived in Vanessa's inbox, containing just 4 words: "End it quietly now." When Vanessa arrived at her lawyer's office for advice, she discovered the door had been sealed. Her lawyer had suddenly vanished, leaving no message behind. She checked her phone and saw a text from an unlisted number. "Tonight, 9 p.m. 9 p.m. East Side apartment. Come alone." She understood what Joey wanted, but she also knew that if she went, she might never come back. And if she didn't go, those she loved, Doug, Leslie, even Randy, might become hostages in a war she could not win. As Vanessa left the hospital that day, a black SUV followed close behind. She noticed its license plate wasn't in any system. She turned left instead of right, cut through 2 neighborhoods, and stopped in front of an abandoned church, the place where she had first met Joey 3 years ago. That night, in suffocating darkness, Vanessa entered the East Side apartment, her hands trembling from both fear and cold. On the table were a stack of documents, a USB drive, and an unmarked handgun. Joey wasn't present, but a handwritten note was left behind. "Choose. Clean the past, or let it drag everyone to hell." She knew this was the final signal: either run and sacrifice everything, or betray and lose the last of her soul. But what Vanessa didn't know was that the FBI had bugged her apartment for over a week. Federal agents were waiting for one mistake, one confession, proof of falsified transfers, and the testimony of a witness no one thought still alive. Kenny, the man presumed dead, who had now sent a handwritten letter to the FBI revealing that it was Vanessa who arranged the meeting between him and Joey the night he vanished. Everything was now in her hands.